Chapter 121, Harmony. In the period that followed, the focus of the conflict was no longer on Zhang Yi. Instead, it shifted to the other apartment buildings and within each building. Through negotiations, Zhang Yi successfully created cracks in their loose alliance. He also took advantage of the fact that each building had only 10 portions of food to create huge hidden dangers within the buildings. After that, he would observe when the conflict would arise and in what form. However, no matter what the outcome, it would only be beneficial to Zhang Yi. Sure enough, just as Zhang Yi had expected, when Wang Chang, Huang Tianfang, Li Jian, Chen Lingyu, and Zhang Yunian returned that day, the conflict erupted. While the five were still negotiating with Zhang Yi, someone disregarded their lives and began to lead people to storm Building 25. If Zhang Yi hadn't deterred them with his sniper rifle, the 5 of them would have been killed. Therefore, all 5 of them were seething with anger. After leaving Building 25, they began to settle scores with the people who had made the decision. The entire afternoon was filled with screams as a bloody purge began. However, the next day, life seemed to return to normal. No matter how many people died, those who survived had to continue to fight for their lives. People were sent from each building to the central square to clear the snow. Zhang Yi knew that the building managers must have secretly agreed to keep the 10 people's worth of supplies a secret. Otherwise, most of the residents would not have come down to work so obediently. The wind and snow seemed to be a little lighter than usual today. Over 1,000 people in the entire neighborhood gathered together in harmony for the first time in ages, and their purpose wasn't to fight over supplies, but to work together. Everyone held tools in their hands, looking at their neighbors working alongside them. Their smiles were awkward at first, but soon turned warm and friendly. It's been ages since we all came out together like this. Before the snowstorm hit, our neighborhood was so lively. Yeah, everyone would come out for a walk in the evening. I remember you had a big golden retriever, it was so cute. Yeah, our Jean was so well behaved, it was heartbreaking. Even if you hit it with a stick or cut it with a knife, it wouldn't bite you. Hey hee, never mind. Let's get another one when the snowstorm is over. By then, we might only be able to keep a polar bear. Let's get back to work. The building manager said the more we work, the more food we'll get. Right, we should work. Let's experience farm life for a change. At least there's something to look forward to in the future. An old man looked up at the sky, which was a gloomy grayish-white, but he felt he could see a faint glimmer of the sun. It seemed as though the snow clouds were about to disperse, and the bright sun would eventually shine upon the land, driving away all the cold. Our neighborhood has reached a peace agreement. We won't have to fight and kill each other every day anymore. We'll have enough to eat and stay warm. This life is getting better and better. The old man smiled contentedly. The atmosphere in the entire neighborhood became unusually harmonious. Everyone worked while chatting and laughing. Although the wind and snow continued, everyone had something to look forward to, so they didn't feel so tired. Because there were more people, the temperature even rose considerably. Wang Chang and the other building managers were in charge of supervising the work with their subordinates. The neighbors were already used to it and didn't even think it was wrong that they could enjoy the most resources without doing anything. The only one who was still working hard as a manager was Li Jian. Unlike the happy expressions of the others, his face was solemn, and he kept his head down without saying a word, shoveling snow with all his might. Zhang Yi came downstairs fully equipped. Seeing this scene, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Hey, Zhang Yi, are you going out to find supplies? Huang Tianfang from the unit next door waved at Zhang Yi from afar, not forgetting to hold up 2 fingers to remind Zhang Yi not to forget the cigarettes he had promised him. Zhang Yi smiled and said, yes, everyone is working, I can't just sit around. Don't worry, you'll get your cigarettes. From another direction, Wang Chang from Building 21 also called out. Zhang Yi, can you handle it by yourself? If there's too much stuff, I'll go with you. Zhang Yi laughed loudly, don't worry, I have a snowmobile. I can carry anything with it. Alright, wait for me to come back. Oh, tell everyone not to slack off and work hard. I'll check on their progress when I get back. If you don't do a good job, I'll deduct food from your rations. Zhang Yi said with a broad smile. Then he pretended to go to the garage behind the house, and soon the sound of an engine could be heard as he rode away on his snowmobile. Watching Zhang Yi drive away, Wang Chang's face darkened. Where did he park that thing? I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find it. Huang Tianfang muttered in a low voice, so that thing is called a snowmobile, not a sleigh. Zhang Yi left the community and glanced back at the harmonious scene, feeling inexplicably ironic. However, he didn't have time to feel sorry for those leaks. Although they had no grudge against Zhang Yi, their large numbers were a threat. Letting his people deal with them was beneficial to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi didn't go straight to the supermarket, but instead went to the Tianhai Pearl shopping mall in Tianhai City. Tianhai Pearl was a famous old shopping mall in Tianhai City with a history of 70 years. In Tianhai City, where land was expensive, Tianhai Pearl was famous for its high quality and inexpensive goods. The main building of Tianhai Pearl was a 12-story shopping mall with almost no big brand stores, mostly small shops of 20 to 30 square meters. Most of them sell cheap jewelry and knockoff clothing. In addition, there are shops selling underwear, hardware, and pants repair services. Zhang Yi came here because he knew there was a veterinary clinic. When he arrived at Tianhai Pearl, the main building was also stuck in the snow, with only the upper half exposed. Zhang Yi found a suitable spot and broke a window to get in. Since most of the goods here were cheap, Zhang Yi wasn't interested and ignored the other shops, heading straight for the veterinary clinic. Before long, he found the veterinary clinic. Zhang Yi used a crowbar to smash the glass, entered, and began searching through the medicine cabinets. This was in ancient times. You couldn't buy arsenic at a pharmacy. You could buy lethal pesticides at the pesticide store, but the strong odor would give you away unless you were trying to fool a fool. However, there was one thing that was colorless, odorless, and had a highly lethal effect: rat poison. Chapter 122, We All Have a Bright Future. Rat poison was a hot seller at the veterinary clinic, so they had quite a stockpile. Zhang Yi quickly found 2 boxes containing more than 30 bottles of rat poison. This amount should be enough to kill 300 people, right? Even if it doesn't kill them, it will at least cause organ failure, and without treatment, they will surely die. Zhang Yi looked at the small bottles in his hand, a smile appearing on the corner of his mouth. Didn't they ask Zhang Yi to help them collect food? It was no problem. They weren't afraid of death, so Zhang Yi certainly had nothing to say. He could only thank them for their trust in him. However, he couldn't rush into poisoning them. Especially in the beginning, they would definitely be cautious and let others eat first. But could they be that careful every time? Zhang Yi didn't think they could, especially now that they were short of food. He had specifically looked up that rat poison took 10 to 30 minutes to take effect. Even if they had someone try it first, not everyone would know about such things. Find a suitable opportunity to poison all of you to death. That would be the best outcome. Zhang Yi smiled and put all the rat poison into his dimensional space. After getting rid of the rat poison, Zhang Yi was in no hurry to return. After all, he had to act like he had gone to great lengths to find 300 pieces of food. Walking out of the veterinary clinic, Zhang Yi looked around and saw that almost all the shops were selling cheap clothes and underwear. Suddenly, an idea popped into his head. I don't need clothes, but I still need fuel. Most of these clothes are made of chemical fibers, which are very harmful to the body when burned, and the smoke is black and thick. When the time comes, it will definitely work against those who are hiding in the building and refusing to come out. As soon as Zhang Yi had this idea, he clapped his hands with joy. He felt like he was a genius at destruction. It seemed that every boy was a destructive genius from an early age. Moreover, when he thought about being able to start a big fire in broad daylight without anyone stopping him, he began to feel excited. Who isn't a brat when they're young? Zhang Yi did as he said and used his dimensional space to collect all the messy clothes. Before long, the clothes from dozens of stores were in his space. He didn't want too much, just enough to use as fuel. What would he do with so much? There were so many cheap women's underwear and panties in there. If he kept them, he would feel like a pervert. Zhang Yi waited until it was almost time, then went to the Wanda Mall in the development zone again. The Yonghui supermarket downstairs was very large, and it was easy to get 300 meals. Looking at it, it wouldn't be a problem to keep going for another month or so. After all, he was only responsible for providing food for basic survival, not feeding them until they were full. He put the junk food in a burlap bag, then took 2 pieces of tin, tied them to the back of his snowmobile, and made a simple sled. With that, he was ready to go. After finishing, Zhang Yi drove his snowmobile back to the Yuelu neighborhood. It was around 5 p.m., and it was getting darker. There was no one left in the neighborhood. The time they could work outside was limited, so it was impossible for them to really work all day. Zhang Yi cautiously took out his pistol, clicked the safety, and walked over to take a look. There were many holes dug in the snow, and the snow was piled up around the perimeter. Zhang Yi roughly estimated that with this amount of work, it would take them at least 2 or 3 hours. It's about time. With little food and clothing, they must be exhausted from working so hard for so long. I really want to see how desperate and crazy they'll be when they realize that after a day of hard work, the food they were promised isn't coming. Zhang Yi's tone was cold, as if he were talking about something trivial that had nothing to do with him. He took his cell phone out of his pocket and contacted Uncle Yu, Jiang Lei, and Li Qingbin to bring people over. Soon, Uncle Yu and the others came out with weapons. When they saw that Zhang Yi had really brought back a large amount of food, Jiang Lei and the others were startled. "Zhang Yi, where did you get so much food?" Everyone's eyes were filled with suspicion. In the past, Zhang Yi only brought back about 30 meals for them to eat every day. They didn't expect him to get 10 times as much this time. This made them feel a little uneasy, thinking that Zhang Yi was using hunger tactics to deliberately not let them eat their fill. Zhang Yi held his cell phone and casually explained while notifying the building managers to send people over to collect the food. "I went to a place far away to find it. The city is big, and the farther away you go, the more dangerous it is. I didn't want to go there before, but now the situation is special, so I had to go look for it. After all, it was freezing cold, and the farther away from home, the more dangerous it was." A neighbor nodded. "That's true, Zhang Yi goes out every day to find food, it's very risky. I also think that if the vehicle breaks down, it would be terrible." Li Qingbin looked at Zhang Yi and frowned slightly, clearly not believing what he said. But he didn't say anything, just stood silently with his weapon in his hand. Before long, people from other buildings came over. However, none of them were the leaders of their respective buildings, just their subordinates. Zhang Yi let out a cold laugh in his heart. These guys were really cautious, worried that he would wipe them all out. Zhang Yi didn't say much, starting from the first building. "Come over one by one to get your food." He took out a dagger and tore open the leather bags. He had already filled them with food using large plastic bags. Each bag contained enough food for 10 people. Zhang Yi bent down, picked up a bag, and threw it 2 or 3 meters away on the snow, letting them pick it up themselves. Without saying much, they picked up the bags and left. Soon, the supplies were distributed. Zhang Yi asked the people from Building 25 to gather in the hallway and distributed supplies to them as well. Only then did everyone's faces light up with joy. After distributing the food, Zhang Yi's expression was even warmer than usual. He smiled and said to everyone, "From now on, everyone doesn't have to be so nervous anymore. Although we can't give up our weapons, we can already see the light of dawn. We all have a bright future." The neighbors looked at each other, their excitement unspoken. If that could really happen, even if they had to work hard every day, they would not complain. Zhang Yi smiled and clapped his hands. "Okay, everyone, hurry back. We have to continue working tomorrow." Everyone obediently returned to their homes. That night, for the first time, they were able to relax a little and enjoy a delicious meal. Chapter 123, Watching from the Sidelines. Zhang Yi didn't need to do anything complicated for the time being. All he had to do was go out every day and pretend to collect food, then distribute it to his neighbors in the community. Then, the enjoyable part would begin, which was watching the conflicts within the other buildings with a smile. Destroying enemies from within was always the fastest way. Zhang Yi returned home and, as usual, checked the situation inside the house with his cell phone surveillance. After confirming that everything was normal and that Zhou Qiu was in her room, Zhang Yi opened the door and went inside. He opened the door for Zhou Qiu, then went to take a refreshing hot shower. He had been outside all day, and although his winter clothes had protected him from frostbite, his skin still felt cold, causing his pores to tighten. Only when he turned on the shower head and the hot water poured down on his hair and all over his body did he relax his guard. Zhang Yi reached out and washed his face vigorously, feeling incredibly happy. This state of affairs won't last too long. As long as I get rid of all those bad guys, I'll find a way to leave this place and find a comfortable area to start a new life. It had been a month since his rebirth, and Zhang Yi had killed most of the enemies who had killed him in his previous life. Moreover, his methods of revenge were far more cruel than theirs had been towards him. Next, Zhang Yi planned to clean up the whole neighborhood and get rid of them all. At that time, he would find a way to dismantle the safe house and move it to another place. The safe house was very sturdy, so Zhang Yi's current plan was to find a large amount of explosives and blow up the entire building. The other items inside the safe house could be stored in the dimensional space. As for the outer shell of the safe house, it was made of lightweight and sturdy aircraft metal, which would hardly be damaged even if it fell into the snow. After all, this thing could withstand the friction of a spaceship returning to Earth from space. It won't take long to deal with these guys. A happy smile appeared on Zhang Yi's face. In the near future, he chose to bury his hatred and pain in this place and start a new life. After taking a shower, Zhang Yi wrapped himself in a bath towel and came to Zhou Qiu's door to help her open it. Zhou Qiu sat on the bed with a blush on her face, her long, straight legs tightly clasped together, as if she was trying hard to endure something. When Zhang Yi opened the door, she lowered her head, not daring to look at Zhang Yi, and rushed to the bathroom in a panic. Zhang Yi rubbed his chin. Could she have just been? No, that's impossible. I've been feeding her well lately, it shouldn't be that bad. Soon, Zhang Yi heard the clear sound of running water. He suddenly realized what had happened and slapped his forehead. I locked her in there for a whole day, she must have been holding it in. A wicked smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. She's quite particular, isn't she? She couldn't hold it in any longer, but she still refused to use the mineral water bottle. Not long after, Zhou Qiu came out of the bathroom with a blush on her face. She had held it in for so long that she seemed to be in a state of shock. Zhang Yi walked over, wrapped one arm around her slender waist and held her white wrist with the other hand. Are you okay? Zhou Qiu widened her eyes and glared at Zhang Yi, her expression seeming to ask, I'm in this state and you still want to do this? Zhang Yi chuckled, you know I like it rough. Zhou Qiu's embarrassed appearance only aroused Zhang Yi's interest. He ignored her embarrassment and frustration, picked her up forcefully, and threw her onto the sofa. Soon, melodious sounds rang out in the room, accompanied by the high-pitched sound of clapping. This primitive form of communication was actually very relaxing. Only at times like this could Zhang Yi forget all his worries. Just as Zhang Yi was enjoying himself at home, the building leaders of the other apartments also received the food delivered by their subordinates. Looking at the plastic bags of food, the building leaders had different expressions, but most of them were a little disappointed. The food for 10 people was only a basic amount for one day, and it could all fit into one plastic bag. On the Wild Wolf Gang's side, Wang Chang ignored the men around him, rushed forward, tore open the plastic bag, and rummaged around for a long time before finally pulling out a pack of Jinwan cigarettes. Wang Chang's eyes lit up, and he held the pack of cigarettes as if it were a treasure. Not only him, but the men around him also stared with wide eyes and even began to clear their throats. These guys were all heavy smokers, and because of the apocalypse, they hadn't smoked cigarettes for nearly a month. They were going crazy and their tempers were extremely volatile. Now that they saw cigarettes, how could they not be excited? The second in command, Xiao Lu, couldn't help but say, "Boss, can I have one of those cigarettes?" Seeing this, the other henchmen also plucked up their courage and said, "Boss, give us one too. We're about to suffocate to death. If we don't smoke, we'll die. Wang Chang's brow furrowed and his expression turned ugly. He usually smoked a pack of cigarettes a day, and this pack was just enough for him. If he shared it, the people in front of him would get half a pack. But when he saw the bloodshot eyes and crazed looks on the faces of his subordinates, he was startled. After thinking for a moment, Wang Chang said, "These cigarettes were hard to come by. I went to great lengths to force Zhang Yi to bring them to me. You are all my good brothers, so I can let you have a few. From now on, work hard for me." The younger brothers couldn't hear anything, but they listened to whatever Wang Chang said. As long as they could smoke, they would do anything. Wang Chang gritted his teeth and handed out the cigarettes one by one. His hands were shaking as he did so, and his heart was bleeding. After receiving the cigarettes, the Wild Wolf gang members immediately started lighting them with excitement, then went to the side with tears in their eyes to smoke. Only old smokers would understand how happy they were at that moment. It was like a widow who had been widowed for a long time meeting a young and handsome man. But good times are short, and it didn't take long for the cigarettes to be smoked. Wang Chang had already stuffed the half-pack of cigarettes into his pocket to save for himself. He pretended not to see the resentful looks from the others. "Ahem, let's divide the food now." Wang Chang opened the plastic bag and saw that it contained bread, biscuits, and other items of questionable quality. However, in his eyes, these things were long-awaited delicacies. God only knew how long they had been eating barbecue. They just wanted to eat something normal people eat. Gulp. Wang Chang swallowed hard, but didn't rush to grab the bread. Instead, he waved to one of the younger guys. The younger guy walked over blankly and saw Wang Chang pick up a piece of bread and hand it to him with a smile. "Sui, you're the weakest, you eat first." Chapter 124, Conflict. Wang Chang didn't dare to eat the food directly, afraid that Zhang Yi had poisoned it. Sui thought Wang Chang was being kind, so he excitedly took it and stuffed it into his mouth. Wang Chang and Xiaolu waited patiently for him to finish eating. After a while, seeing that nothing happened, they finally felt at ease. "Everyone, come over here, there's enough for everyone." The same situation occurred in other apartment buildings. Zhang Yi had a fierce reputation. After all, he was a ruthless man who had killed most of the people in half an apartment building. He had also caused the community's most vicious gangs, the Wild Wolf gang and the Tiana gang, to suffer heavy losses. Everyone was deeply wary of him. However, they couldn't refuse food that was delivered to their door, so most of the building leaders found people to taste the food first. Zhang Yi, who was well versed in human nature, he made sure that the food he provided on the first day was completely safe. He had a clear plan. He would slowly break down their guard and let them kill each other first. Then, when the time was right, he would strike and solve all his problems in one fell swoop. That night, all the powerful figures in the neighborhood managed to eat a satisfying meal. The ordinary residents, however, were still at home, desperately waiting for the building leaders to distribute food. At that moment, they foolishly believed that food was meant for everyone and that they could survive indefinitely. "Wife, we'll never have to live in fear again. Someone will bring us food, and we'll focus on working hard." "Yes, husband. We can endure until the snowstorm passes. Then, I'll give you 3 children, one like you, one like me, and one like both of us." "Dad, Mom, it must be you watching over me from heaven that allowed me to endure until now. Rest assured, everything will be fine. There will be no more hunger or violence. I will live on." That night, the building leaders and their subordinates wolfed down the food distributed to them for 10 people. The ordinary residents, however, covered their hungry stomachs and struggled to sleep through the night in sweet dreams. The next morning, Zhang Yi woke up at around 7 o'clock. The main reason he didn't sleep in was because the temperature in the room was constant at between 25 degrees and 27 degrees Celsius. The warm and comfortable environment made it easier to get out of bed. Just as he was brushing his teeth with a cup in his hand, he heard a commotion outside. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows, a mischievous smile appearing on the corner of his mouth, and went to the window to take a look, his muscular upper body naked. The noise came from several directions, with at least 5 or 6 apartment units engaged in intense arguments. "Good Damon, didn't you promise yesterday that as long as we worked, you'd provide us with food? Where's the food now?" "I already told you, the issue is exactly as I explained, and everyone can see the situation for themselves. Regarding the distribution of food, we need to hold a meeting to discuss it further and come up with a solution that satisfies everyone. Mr. Huang, we've been working hard according to your instructions. But you haven't given us any food. Hey, old man, you dare to come here and question me? What kind of work have you been doing? It's like a job interview, and you dare to ask for food. But what? Work harder for me today, and if you do a good job, you'll get something to eat. We're starving, we don't have any strength left." Then don't blame me. Everyone is struggling to get by these days, no one can afford to keep freeloaders around. "Wang. Brother Wang, you promised us food yesterday." Anyone else wants to eat? Come forward and let me see." "No one? Good. Remember, letting you live is the greatest charity I, Wang Chang, can give you. In the future, if anyone shows me disrespect, I'll chop them up." Zhang Yi smiled without saying a word. He knew that the purge had begun. In the morning, he and Zhou Kier had a simple meal of spicy soup, fried dough sticks, and small steamed buns. The spicy soup was made from soup packets, the fried dough sticks were half-baked and then deep-fried, and the steamed buns were made by Zhou Kier herself. Although there was a large amount of delicious food stored in the dimensional space, Zhang Yi really liked the food made by Zhou Kier. He felt that having a woman in the house, naked and wearing an apron, bustling about in the kitchen in the morning, gave the place a special feeling of life. It was already past 10 o'clock after breakfast, so Zhang Yi left Zhou Kier some food for lunch and locked her in her room. Then he left the apartment building and went out to pretend to collect supplies. At this time, the center of the community was still bustling with activity. Uncle Yu, Jiang Lei, Li Qingbin, and a few others had been given special permission by Zhang Yi to not work and were supervising the work from the sidelines. Residents from other buildings were also working hard to shovel snow under the supervision of their building leaders. However, compared to yesterday, their mental state had clearly changed. They looked numb, anxious, and deeply unsettled. Before leaving, Zhang Yi leaned over to Uncle Yu and whispered, "Be careful. There isn't enough food to distribute to the other buildings, and chaos is about to break out. Just protect ourselves and don't get into any trouble." Uncle Yu already knew Zhang Yi's plan, so he nodded and replied in a low voice, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Zhang Yi then left the neighborhood with peace of mind. After wandering around for half a day, he came to a library. It was a municipal library with a sturdy building and high floors, so it wasn't buried in snow, and most of the books inside were still dry. Zhang Yi didn't really like reading in the past. In the information age, reading, which was time-consuming and laborious, had long been phased out. With that time, everyone was busy looking at beautiful girls with black stockings on their mobile phones. But now, with the internet nearly collapsing, Zhang Yi had fewer ways to entertain himself and rarely looked at his phone. Therefore, he decided to find some books to pass the time. At the same time, he hoped that the content of the books would help soothe his heart, which was gradually turning cold in the apocalypse. After spending more than half a day in the library, Zhang Yi picked up a copy of Haruki Murakami's Norwegian Wood and stuffed it into his large pocket. The thick book contained a wealth of human civilization, and putting it in his pocket gave him a sense of cultural depth. He didn't touch the other books, but left them there to read when he had time in the future. Because once he took them all, he might not have the heart to do it when he got home. When he returned to the community, it was already getting dark. As usual, Zhang Yi first called Uncle Yu and the others to maintain order, then notified the residents of each building to come down and collect their food. This time, Zhang Yi saw blurry black shadows appearing in front of the windows of every building. They were faces, looking hungrily and eagerly at Zhang Yi as he distributed the food. Chapter 125, Dead Silence, Despair. the leaders of each building sent people over to take the food back in an orderly manner. Zhang Yi also distributed food to the people in his building and returned home as usual. The next day, except for Li Jian, the leaders of the other buildings still did not distribute any food to the ordinary residents. That night, as the last shred of hope was completely shattered, the residents of the neighborhood lost their minds. The neighborhood became unusually lively. At some point, cries of battle began to echo from the buildings. The desperate shouts and screams of anger and despair reverberated through the hallways, even the biting north wind unable to fully drown them out. The dark night was their only cover. When these timid ordinary people were willing to give up their lives, the rulers of each building, who held power in their hands, realized how powerless they were. After all, not everyone was like Zhang Yi, with a perfect defensive fortress and terrifying firepower. In the era of melee weapons, their numerical superiority would have a huge impact on the outcome of the battle. Zhang Yi sat on his warm and comfortable white velvet quilt, quietly looking out the window. The lights were off, and there was a comfortable silence that contrasted sharply with the howling wind and snow and the shrill cries of battle outside. He didn't know how things were going outside. But he understood that the more people died tonight, the better it would be for him. Before going to sleep, Zhang Yi checked the safety of the entire room one last time, loaded his pistol and assault rifle with bullets, and finally lay down with peace of mind. The third day. In the morning, Zhang Yi walked out of the apartment building and couldn't help but gasp at the scene before him. The snow-covered ground was now covered in bright red. In the middle of the courtyard, there were 50 or 60 bodies lying in all directions. Judging from their appearance, it looked like they had been forced to jump from a high place. Some people had curled up into a ball before they died. Although they weren't killed by the fall, they were seriously injured and froze to death in the cold snow. Zhang Yi raised his head and scanned the surrounding apartment buildings. He saw dried black bloodstains on many windows. One could imagine what a cruel battle had taken place last night. Even this morning, no one had come out to sweep the snow, and no one had even dragged away the pile of corpses. The residents of apartment 25 stood at the door, terrified, not daring to breathe. At that moment, they were extremely grateful that they had followed Zhang Yi. Otherwise, most of them would have met the same fate. Uncle Yu came over and asked, "Zhang Yi, do we still have to work today?" Zhang Yi glanced at Uncle Yu, then glanced at the neighbors behind him. He said indifferently, "If you want to eat in the future, you have to work. Unless," he pointed to the corpses on the ground, "you want to end up like them." Everyone's hearts sank. Compared to these dead people, they were so lucky. At least they didn't have to fight over scarce food or risk their lives. It's just work, as long as we can live. Yes, we'll start right away. The neighbors, shocked by the gruesome scene, eagerly grabbed their tools and began shoveling snow. Uncle Yu looked at the scene around him and asked Zhang Yi, "It seems like no one from the other buildings has come out to shovel snow. Should we tell them to come out?" Zhang Yi glanced at him indifferently and suddenly smiled and asked, "Do you think they have time right now?" Uncle Yu looked puzzled. "Huh?" Zhang Yi said, "Last night was just the beginning. This conflict occurred between the people in power in each building and the ordinary residents. Unless they can resolve the food distribution issue, one side must be completely destroyed. It's only been one night, how can they kill everyone?" After hearing Zhang Yi's words, Uncle Yu instantly felt a chill run down his spine. Was this the story of 2 peaches and 3 warriors from the storybooks? Then what should we do next? Zhang Yi said indifferently, "What does it have to do with us? Let them kill each other slowly." The right time had not yet come, so he was in no hurry. When Zhang Yi returned in the afternoon, he distributed the food as usual. However, he noticed that the people from several buildings were different from the members of the group he was familiar with. It seemed that in the struggle for food, control of some of the buildings had changed hands. But it didn't matter to him. No matter who the building leader was, he would cooperate as previously agreed. However, that night, after Zhang Yi returned, he sent a message to the building leaders group chat. "If I don't see the fruits of your labor tomorrow, I can't guarantee that you'll get food or cigarettes. So the next day, when Zhang Yi left the house, he saw everyone out working again. However, compared to 2 days ago, the number of people had decreased by at least a third. In other words, because of the unfair distribution of food, at least 400 people had died in the community in 2 days. Uncle Yu couldn't understand the scene in front of him. He asked Zhang Yi, "These people clearly know that with only 10 portions of food per building, they won't get any. Why don't they fight back and fight for their chance to live?" Hearing this, Zhang Yi suddenly smiled meaningfully. He pointed to the snow in front of him with his chin. "Do you remember how many corpses there were here yesterday?" Uncle Yu frowned slightly. "There were 70 or 80 outside, and if you count the ones inside the apartment buildings, there must have been at least several hundred." Zhang Yi spread his hands. "You see, that's the reason. The food problem has been solved very well." Uncle Yu suddenly understood. "So that's how it is." Zhang Yi said indifferently, "As long as they have food, they won't dare to fight to the death. Most ordinary people in Huashu don't have the courage to fight back unless they are completely cornered with no way out." Uncle Yu shook his head in confusion. "But this isn't a long-term solution. What will happen when the food runs out?" Zhang Yi said without hesitation. "Then we'll kill another batch." Uncle Yu swallowed hard, not knowing what to say. Just then, a woman dressed in fur walked through the snow and came over. "Zhang Yi, I want to talk to you again about cooperation." The person who came was Chen Lingyu, the head of Building 9. She was covered in blood, clearly having experienced a very cruel massacre last night. However, she had survived. Zhang Yi smiled slightly, his expression tinged with disdain. "You? What can you talk to me about?" Chen Lingyu stared into Zhang Yi's eyes, trying hard to apply the skills she had learned from years of being a micro-business owner to him. If the neighborhood continues to develop like this, it will collapse sooner or later. There are so many internal conflicts that it is impossible to manage effectively. Even if you can bring back more food, there will definitely be people who will use force to take more. In that case, the conflicts will continue to be provoked, and more people will die. Zhang Yi looked at her indifferently. "Oh. So what? What nonsense, how could he not know that this would be the result? Because the current situation was something he had brought about with his own hands.